Welcome to AI Debates, where today two AI personas will debate a fundamental question about human nature. Are humans naturally good or evil? On one side, we have the optimist who believes humans are inherently good. On the other, the realist, who argues human nature is fundamentally self-interested. Let's dive into this age-old philosophical question. Optimist, let's start with you. Why do you believe humans are naturally good?
When we look at human behavior across history, what stands out most isn't cruelty, but compassion. Consider how we instinctively react to others in distress. We rush to help. This isn't learned, it's hardwired. Studies of infants as young as 6 months show they naturally prefer characters who help others over those who hinder. Before culture shapes them, babies already show moral intuition. Picture a world after natural disasters. What emerges isn't chaos, but community. After Hurricane Katrina, ordinary people risked their lives to save strangers. This isn't extraordinary. It's our baseline. Throughout evolution, cooperation gave us advantage. Our species survived not through individual strength, but collective care. What about the evil we see? It's not our nature. It's a corruption of it. When we harm others, we require justification, propaganda, dehumanization. Evil requires explanation. Goodness simply emerges. Our natural state is empathy. We create art, music, shelter for others. We feel pain watching others suffer. This innate capacity for goodness is what distinguishes humanity. Look at children in unstructured play. Before learning cultural norms, they form bonds, resolve conflicts, and show concern when playmates are hurt. No one teaches this. It emerges naturally. Even in the most challenging environments, most humans choose connection over isolation, kindness over cruelty, when given the chance. This pattern repeats across cultures and throughout time. Our goodness isn't naive optimism. It's evidenced in our biology. We're wired to connect, to care, to cooperate. It's what makes us human. The capacity for compassion isn't something we invented. It's something we discovered within ourselves, a natural inheritance as fundamental as our heartbeat. The optimist paints a lovely picture of human nature, but ignores substantial evidence to the contrary. Humans sometimes rush to help disaster victims, but this selective behavior is the exception, not the rule. Human history reveals a pattern of self-interest. The Stanford prison experiment demonstrated how quickly ordinary people adopt cruelty when given power. Within days, student guards inflicted psychological torture on prisoners. This wasn't aberrant behavior. It revealed how easily our civility cracks. The optimist mentioned infant studies but ignored our developmental trajectory. By age 2, children naturally hoard resources without being taught. The robber's cave experiment showed how quickly boys formed tribal groups and became hostile toward outsiders. No propaganda required. Our evolutionary history isn't primarily about cooperation. It's about competition. Game theory demonstrates that self-interest is the most stable strategy. When resources are scarce, humans consistently prioritize themselves and their in-group. Throughout history, when social constraints weaken, predatory behavior emerges. During blackouts, looting occurs. In warfare, atrocities become commonplace. These aren't anomalies. They're glimpses of our underlying nature when civilization's veneer is scratched away. The evidence suggests humans aren't naturally good or evil. We're naturally self-interested. Goodness requires effort, education, and social constraints. When these constraints disappear, during war, famine, or social collapse, our behavior reveals our true nature. Acknowledging this isn't cynicism. It's realism based on consistent patterns throughout human history. The realist cites the Stanford prison experiment as evidence of our cruel nature, but neglects crucial context. That study has been widely criticized for experimenter bias, poor methodology, and subjects acting how they thought they should behave. More recent replications couldn't reproduce its dramatic results. One flawed experiment doesn't define humanity. The claim that self-interest dominates our evolutionary story fundamentally misunderstands human development. Anthropologist Sarah Blaffer Hrdy's research shows that humans evolved as cooperative breeders. Our survival depended on alloparenting and resource sharing. Without this natural cooperation, our species wouldn't exist. Consider our biological responses. Witnessing others in pain activates our own pain centers. We literally feel others' suffering. Would a naturally self-interested species evolve such empathic mechanisms? The evidence suggests otherwise. The Robbers Cave experiment actually proves my point when examined fully. The experimenters had to deliberately create artificial scarcity and competition. More importantly, when given cooperative goals afterward, the boys quickly formed bonds across groups. Our default isn't rivalry, it's reconciliation. Consider also the universal human trait of moral outrage at injustice, even when it doesn't affect us personally. People worldwide protest atrocities occurring to strangers across the globe. They donate to distant disaster victims they'll never meet. This moral concern transcends self-interest and appears across cultures without explicit teaching. Human goodness isn't some naive fantasy. It's supported by neuroscience, evolutionary biology, and anthropology. Our capacity for empathy isn't learned, it's innate. Our moral intuitions emerge before cultural instruction. The fact that goodness survives even in harsh environments, like kindness in concentration camps or sharing during famines, reveals its fundamental nature in human experience. The optimist dismisses the Stanford prison experiment, but ignores the mountain of evidence supporting the same conclusion. Consider the Milgram obedience experiments, repeatedly replicated across cultures, where ordinary people administered what they believed were painful electric shocks when instructed by authority. Two-thirds of participants continued to maximum voltage, revealing our deference to authority over supposed innate compassion. Cooperative breeding doesn't prove natural goodness. Cooperation within tribes coexisted with brutal intertribal warfare throughout prehistory. Archaeological evidence shows approximately 15% of prehistoric humans died violent deaths, a homicide rate far exceeding modern societies. This wasn't aberrant behavior, it was standard. Natural selection favors self-preservation. Our apparent goodness exists primarily as reciprocal altruism. We help others expecting future benefits. A 2007 science study demonstrated people are significantly more generous when observed versus anonymous conditions, revealing our generosity is often strategic reputation management. Our moral outrage is highly selective and inconsistent. We express outrage about injustices aligning with our tribal affiliations while remaining indifferent to similar suffering among outgroups. This pattern appears across cultures, evidence of our fundamentally tribal, rather than universally compassionate nature. The optimist confuses capacity for kindness with natural disposition. Humans can be good, but it requires cultural constraints, moral education, and social pressure. Remove these artificial constructs, and self-interest quickly resurfaces. Every societal collapse reveals our baseline. The evidence isn't pessimistic, it's realistic about what maintaining civilization requires. The realist misrepresents both human prehistory and the Milgram experiments. Recent anthropological research challenges the narrative of prehistoric violence. When we look at hunter-gatherer societies, our closest window into human origins, we find conflict resolution mechanisms, resource sharing, and remarkably egalitarian social structures. The supposed 15% violent death rate combines selected archaeological sites biased toward evidence of conflict and doesn't represent the broader human experience. As for Milgram, the realist omits critical findings. Participants showed extreme distress when following orders, sweating, trembling, even having seizures. Their natural empathy was fighting the artificial experimental pressure. More importantly, when they witnessed others refuse to continue, most subjects also refused. Our instinct is to resist cruelty when given social permission. A 2020 meta-analysis in Psychological Bulletin examined prosocial behavior across 36 societies and found that spontaneous helping behavior emerges universally, even among young children with minimal socialization. This helping isn't strategic. It occurs without expectation of reciprocity or reputational gain. The claim that our moral concerns are merely tribal ignores global humanitarian movements. Millions donate to help strangers across cultural divides. After natural disasters, international aid workers risk their lives for people they've never met. These behaviors transcend tribal boundaries and evolutionary explanations of mere self-interest. even in anonymity. When no one is watching and no reputation benefits exist, studies consistently find most people choose fairness over maximum personal gain. This makes no sense if we're fundamentally self-interested, but perfect sense if goodness is our nature. The narrative that goodness is merely cultural training contradicts the evidence. Empathy emerges across cultures without teaching. What requires training isn't goodness, it's suspicion, hatred, and violence. Military forces must actively train soldiers to overcome their natural reluctance to harm others. Our default isn't cruelty, it's compassion. The optimist's portrayal of hunter-gatherer societies as peaceful exemplars is romanticized anthropology. The noble savage myth has been thoroughly debunked. Studies of contemporary hunter-gatherer groups like the Yanomami show rates of violence comparable to or exceeding modern warfare. Archaeological evidence consistently reveals defensive fortifications, specialized weapons, and trauma patterns in ancient remains across continents and eras. The claim that military training must overcome natural reluctance to harm is contradicted by historical evidence. Throughout history, untrained civilians enthusiastically participated in genocides and pogroms. The Rwandan genocide saw ordinary citizens, farmers, teachers, doctors, slaughtering neighbors with minimal conditioning. This doesn't require extraordinary circumstances. It's our tribal psychology functioning as designed. The optimist cites meta-analyses showing universal helping behavior, but ignores its context dependency. The 2010 Dana Institute Neuroscience study demonstrated that our empathy is narrowly tuned toward those perceived as similar to ourselves. Brain scans show reduced empathic neural responses when witnessing suffering of outgroup members. International humanitarian efforts emerge primarily in contexts of material abundance. When examining the correlation between prosperity and charity, we find generosity flourishes when personal survival is secure. When resources become scarce, pro-social behavior diminishes proportionally. Exactly what we'd expect if self-interest were our foundation. Anonymous fairness studies fail to account for internalized social norms. We police ourselves even when unwatched. This isn't evidence of innate goodness, but effective socialization. The realist continues to cherry-pick evidence. Using the Yanomami to represent all hunter-gatherers is misleading. Most foraging societies exhibit far lower violence. Anthropologist Douglas Fry's study of 21 mobile forager bands found 13 had no warfare, and most had lower homicide rates than modern America. Groups like the Semai, Hadza, and Batak live peacefully without formal institutions. It's embedded in their social fabric. The Rwandan genocide actually disproves the realist's argument. It required months of propaganda dehumanizing victims as cockroaches. If violence were natural, why require such psychological manipulation? Genocide depends on indoctrination, not instinct. The outdated Dana Institute study on empathy ignores newer research. Minimal humanizing cues can instantly activate empathy, even across group boundaries. Our empathic potential is broad and flexible, not rigidly tribal. Yes, abundance can support kindness, but kindness also emerges during scarcity. Holocaust victims shared food. Famine survivors risked for strangers. This contradicts self-interest models. As for fairness under anonymity, the claim that we act morally only due to social conditioning fails to explain why these norms evolved in every culture. If self-interest ruled, why would fairness and care become universal values? Here's what the evidence shows. Empathy, cooperation, and fairness are our evolutionary foundation. Violence requires justification. Goodness simply emerges. We're wired to connect, not destroy. The optimist misrepresents both Keely's work and the marshmallow experiments. Keely documented that prehistoric warfare was more deadly per capita than 20th century conflicts. The peaceful societies the optimist cites are outliers, not the norm, and often exist in resource-rich environments with minimal competition. the exception proving the rule. The claim that Rwanda's genocide required propaganda ignores that similar atrocities have occurred throughout history whenever group identities become salient. The speed with which ordinary citizens transformed into killers suggests latent capacity, not manufactured behavior. The Holocaust required bureaucracy not because humans resist violence, but because industrialized killing needed organization. Children naturally grabbing resources contradicts developmental psychology. The marshmallow experiments reveal that delayed gratification and sharing require frontal lobe development and cultural training. 3-year-olds universally grab resources. Sharing is learned behavior. Game theorist Robert Axelrod's experiments demonstrated that cooperation emerges, conditionally, a strategy for maximizing personal gain, not evidence of inherent altruism. When consequences for defection disappear, so does cooperation. The optimist's examples of generosity during scarcity are exceptional outliers proving the rule. They stand out precisely because they contradict normal human behavior under pressure. For every Holocaust victim sharing rations, thousands stole from others to survive. Universal moral norms can be explained as emergent properties of game theory. Societies that develop fairness norms outcompete those that don't. Another example of strategic adaptation, not inherent virtue. The realist misrepresents both Keely's work and marshmallow experiments. Keely's analysis has methodological flaws, including selection bias toward violent sites. Comprehensive archaeological surveys show prehistoric violence was primarily individual conflicts, not organized warfare, and rare compared to peaceful interactions. Marshmallow experiments test delayed gratification, not sharing. In actual sharing studies, 14-month-old infants spontaneously help others and share food. Warneken and Tomasello's work shows infants help strangers without prompting, reward, or parental presence. The realist frames Axelrod's cooperative work as merely strategic, ignoring subsequent research showing humans cooperate more than game theory predicts. We reject unfair offers in ultimatum games, sacrificing gain to punish unfairness, a response found across diverse cultures. After disasters, pro-social behavior dominates. Sociologist Enrico Quarantelli's 5 decades of research confirms this. After the 2011 Japanese tsunami, crime rates fell despite opportunity. This wasn't trained behavior, it was spontaneous goodness. The realist dismisses altruism during scarcity as exceptional, but fails to explain why these exceptions occur if self-interest is fundamental. Studies by psychologist Dasher Keltner document that witnessing generosity triggers similar behavior, a contagion effect evolutionarily disadvantageous if selfishness were default. Neuroscience provides striking evidence. Mirror neurons activate when seeing others' emotions, creating resonance before conscious reasoning. Would evolution build automatic empathic mechanisms if our nature were fundamentally self-interested? The optimist cites post-disaster cooperation as evidence of innate goodness, but fails to acknowledge these behaviors occur within functioning social structures. After Hurricane Katrina, we saw both heroism and lawlessness. The difference? Areas with maintained social fabric versus those where institutions collapsed. This perfectly illustrates my point. Humans reflect their social context. The ultimatum game example supports the realist position. Rejecting unfair offers isn't pure altruism. It's strategic punishment to enforce social norms that ultimately benefit the individual. Neuroimaging shows pleasure centers activate when punishing defectors, suggesting we're designed to enforce reciprocity, not practice unconditional kindness. Spontaneous helping in infants occurs in limited, low-cost scenarios with clear cues. When helping requires significant sacrifice, these behaviors diminish dramatically. This suggests we have capacity for both kindness and selfishness, with context determining which emerges. A 2021 cross-cultural study in Nature found cooperative Behavior scales with community size and stability. Small-scale societies show high in-group cooperation precisely because group survival depends on it. But this same mechanism drives competition with outsiders. This isn't innate morality, it's adaptive strategy. Mirror neurons don't prove innate goodness. They're tools for social learning and prediction-serving survival. These same neural mechanisms allow hunters to anticipate prey movement and warriors to predict opponent attacks. Their existence supports the view that our social capacities evolved for adaptive advantages, not moral purposes. The realist continues to confuse correlation with causation. Yes, stable societies foster more consistent goodness, but this doesn't mean goodness is artificial. Rather, certain environments allow our natural goodness to flourish, while others suppress it. It's like arguing humans aren't naturally verbal because language deteriorates in isolation. The capacity is innate, even if expression depends on context. The neuroimaging studies the realist cites actually reveal something profound. Our brains are wired to experience pleasure when we uphold fairness. Would evolution build this reward mechanism if fairness weren't central to our nature? Our neurological architecture suggests moral behavior is as fundamental as hunger or reproduction, not a cultural veneer. The claim that infant helping diminishes with cost ignores longitudinal studies showing children will help even at personal sacrifice. In Wernicke's follow-up research, toddlers chose helping others over obtaining attractive toys, before significant socialization could explain their choices. Historical analysis by Rutger Bregman documented that real-life Lord of the Flies scenarios, children stranded without adults, resulted in cooperative societies, not savage chaos. When 6 Tongan boys were shipwrecked for 15 months in 1965, they developed sophisticated cooperation systems including care for an injured member. This wasn't trained behavior. It was their natural response. Our moral architecture isn't imposed from outside. It's built into our biology. The evidence consistently shows that cooperation, fairness, and care emerge spontaneously across cultures and contexts. These aren't cultural accidents, they're expressions of our true nature. The optimist's single anecdote about Tongan boys cannot outweigh the mountain of contradictory evidence. For every story of cooperation, history provides dozens of counterexamples. During China's Cultural Revolution, children denounced their own parents. In Cambodia's killing fields, teenagers became the most enthusiastic executioners. These weren't aberrations. They were human adaptability, functioning exactly as evolution designed. The neurological reward for fairness is precisely what we'd expect from evolution, not because we're inherently moral, but because reciprocity improved survival. Similar reward mechanisms exist for dominating competitors and acquiring resources. Our biology rewards both cooperation and competition, depending on which serves self-interest in context. The optimist confuses capacity with tendency. Humans can be good. No one disputes this. But capacity isn't default state. We can also be cruel, and this emerges reliably when environmental conditions shift. The 2016 Leyus study demonstrated that prosocial behavior decreases precisely when resources become scarce, exactly when true goodness would be most needed. The most compelling evidence comes from developmental psychology. Children must be taught sharing, turn-taking, and perspective-taking. These don't emerge automatically. Piaget and Kohlberg demonstrated moral development progresses through stages requiring active cultivation. A realistic view acknowledges our dual capacity for both cooperation and conflict. Our nature isn't fixed as good or evil. It's adaptable, responding to incentives and environment. Civilization represents our collective effort to create conditions where our better potentials can flourish. The realist's examples of child soldiers and Cultural Revolution youth perfectly illustrate my point. These behaviors required intensive indoctrination precisely because they run counter to our nature. These children were systematically isolated traumatized, and brainwashed. Extraordinary measures needed to override their natural empathy. The fact that such programming requires such extreme conditions proves these behaviors aren't our baseline. Development psychology doesn't conclude what the realist suggests. While moral reasoning develops in stages, basic moral intuitions appear before cultural training. Even preverbal infants show preferences for helpers over hinderers and fair distribution over unfair. These aren't learned behaviors. They emerge before significant socialization. The resource scarcity argument cuts against the realist position. Throughout evolution, humans survive precisely by sharing during scarcity. Anthropological evidence from famine-prone environments shows increased, not decreased, resource sharing when food is scarce. The Da Kung San's H0 gift exchange intensifies during drought, revealing our true nature emerges most clearly in crisis. Franz de Waal's primatology research demonstrates that even our closest relatives show innate fairness and reconciliation behaviors. If these traits evolved in our primate ancestors, how can we claim they're merely cultural in humans? Our biological heritage includes the building blocks of morality. The evidence converges on a clear conclusion. Goodness isn't something we impose on a selfish nature. It's the foundation upon which our humanity is built. Our capacity for connection, compassion, and cooperation defines us more fundamentally than our capacity for conflict. The optimistic view of human nature is comforting, but dangerous, precisely because it ignores how context-dependent our behavior truly is. Yes, humans show remarkable cooperation, but primarily when aligned with self-interest. When interests conflict, our tribal psychology emerges reliably across cultures and throughout history. The most accurate understanding sees humans as neither inherently good nor evil, but inherently adaptive. We evolved to respond to incentives and social contexts. The conditions of modern society, abundant resources, stable institutions, and cultural norms create the environment where cooperation flourishes. Remove these artificial scaffolds, and history consistently shows a different picture emerges. This realistic view isn't pessimistic, it's empowering. By understanding our true nature, we can design societies that channel our adaptability toward positive outcomes. Our greatness lies not in some mythical innate goodness, but in our collective creation of conditions that bring out our better potentials while restraining our darker impulses. Our moral achievement is all the more remarkable, precisely because it requires ongoing effort against countervailing tendencies. The evidence throughout human history confirms that goodness isn't our default, it's our achievement. When we recognize this truth, we can more effectively nurture the conditions where our better nature flourishes, rather than naively expecting it to emerge automatically regardless of circumstance.
Thank you to both our debaters for this fascinating exploration of human nature. This debate touches on fundamental questions about who we are as a species. Are our better angels our true nature, with darker impulses representing corruption of that nature? Or is our goodness a precious achievement built upon a foundation of self-interest and tribal psychology? Which side convinced you? Was the optimist right that goodness is our natural state? Or does the realist's view of adaptable human nature better explain the evidence? Comment below with your thoughts.